The electric shock of her fingertips brushing his, as she handed over the membership card, made Kai O'Malley wonder if this particular 5:30 a.m. shift was going to be different from all the others. 5 months working the front desk at Elevate Fitness, the exclusive gym tucked into the ground floor of the Montgomery, one of Chicago's most prestigious apartment buildings. And she'd never felt that kind of jolt before. "Good morning," said the man standing before her, his voice carrying that particular gravelly quality that only came from being the first words spoken that day. "Looks like it's just us again." Kai smiled, trying not to stare too obviously. He was right at this hour. The gym was consistently empty except for him and occasionally one or two others who never stayed long. But this man, Gabriel something, she recalled from his membership profile, was religious about his early workouts. "You know what they say about the early bird," she replied, scanning his card. "Though I'm not sure what worms you're catching at 5:30 in the morning," he laughed, and the sound did something strange to Kai's chest. It wasn't just that he was devastatingly handsome, though, with his broad shoulders, dark hair with the perfect amount of salt at the temples, and those intense gray eyes. He certainly was. It was more that for the past 5 months she'd watched him come in, work out with focused determination, and leave with barely a nod. Today he was talking to her, and somehow it felt momentous. "The early bird catches a peaceful gym," he said, taking back his card. "No waiting for equipment, no strangers sweat to wipe up, plus I have to be at the office by 7, Kai nodded. "Well, enjoy your workout, mister." She trailed off, realizing she'd never properly introduced herself to him despite seeing him almost daily. Steele. Gabriel Steele. "But please call me Gabe," he extended his hand. "Kai O'Malley," she replied, taking his hand. There it was again, that peculiar electricity. "I'm usually here mornings, as you know." "I do know." Gabe smiled, and Kai noticed the lines around his eyes crinkled pleasantly. "Though I never properly introduced myself either. Better late than never." As he walked away toward the weights section, Kai tried to refocus on the book she'd been reading before his arrival. She was halfway through her master's degree in sports medicine, working this job to pay the bills while she finished her studies. The Montgomery's gym wasn't the highest-paying gig she could have found, but the hours were perfect for her class schedule, and the quiet mornings gave her study time. She glanced up occasionally, watching as Gabe methodically worked through his routine. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, efficient and focused. No wasted motion. She wondered what he did for work that required such early hours, probably a lawyer or doctor, given the building's clientele. The Montgomery wasn't the kind of place people lived in on a personal trainer's salary, which was what Kai had initially assumed he might be. 45 minutes later he was done, slightly out of breath but looking energized as he approached the desk again. "Have a good day, Kai," he said, her name sounding different in his mouth somehow. "You too, Gabe," she replied, surprised at the warmth in her voice. As the glass door closed behind him, she opened the gym management system on the computer, and feeling only slightly guilty, pulled up Gabriel Steele's member profile. The contact information was minimal, just an email address with no company domain, a cell number, and his apartment number on the 31st floor. Nothing to indicate what he did for work. Kai closed the file, feeling vaguely disappointed. Not that it mattered. The man was so far out of her league that she might as well be on a different planet. People who lived at the Montgomery didn't date gym employees who shared a cramped apartment with 2 roommates and lived on ramen and coffee. The next morning, Gabe arrived at his usual time, but instead of just nodding and heading straight for the weights, he lingered at the desk. "Sleep well?" he asked, which struck Kai as an oddly intimate question from someone who had only properly introduced himself yesterday. "As well as possible when you have to wake up at 4 a.m., she replied with a small laugh. Not great actually, work stuff." He ran a hand through his hair. "But a good workout should clear my head." "What kind of work do you do?" Kai asked, seizing the opportunity. Gabe hesitated for just a moment. I'm in shipping. Transportation logistics, really. It's not very exciting. Kai couldn't quite place why, but something about his answer felt off. She'd worked customer service jobs long enough to recognize when someone was being deliberately vague. Sounds complicated, she offered. It can be. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. How about you? You're always reading something when I come in. I'm finishing my master's in sports medicine, she said. This job lets me study during the quiet hours. His expression brightened with what appeared to be genuine interest. That's impressive. Planning to work with athletes? That's the dream, Kai nodded. I'd love to work with a professional team someday, but I'd be happy with a good sports clinic to start. A woman entered the gym then, one of the few other early birds, and their conversation naturally came to an end. Gabe moved toward the weights, and Kai returned to her textbook, but she found herself constantly glancing up, wondering why a transportation logistics manager could afford the 31st floor of the Montgomery, and why he'd suddenly decided to start talking to her after months of silence. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine developed. Gabe would arrive at 5:30, chat with Kai for a few minutes, work out, and then exchange a few more words before leaving. She learned that he traveled frequently for work, that he'd moved to Chicago from Boston 3 years ago, and that he lived alone. He never mentioned family, relationships, or details about his job beyond vague comments about the office or meetings. In turn, she told him about growing up in Milwaukee with 4 brothers, her passion for helping injured athletes recover, and her struggles balancing work, school, and a meager social life. He listened with an intensity that made her feel like everything she said mattered, which was both flattering and disconcerting. You know, the gym has a pretty decent smoothie bar, Gabe said one morning after his workout, towel draped around his neck. It doesn't open until 7, but I could bring you one tomorrow if you'd like. Kai felt a flutter in her stomach. That's really nice, but you don't have to do that. I know I don't have to, he replied. I want to. What's your preference? The next morning, he arrived with 2 smoothies, a protein-packed one for himself and a berry one for her, exactly as she described. You're spoiling me, she said, accepting the drink. I might start expecting this every day. Would that be such a bad thing? He asked, and there was something in his gaze that made Kai look away. I suppose not, she answered softly, and when she looked back up, he was smiling. This continued for another week: smoothies, conversation, and increasingly lingering glances. Kai found herself looking forward to 5:30 a.m. with an eagerness that had nothing to do with her job. Then, on a Wednesday morning, Gabe didn't show. Kai felt a disproportionate sense of disappointment as 6:15 came and went with no sign of him. By 6:45, she had convinced herself that he'd lost interest in their morning chats, or worse, that she'd imagined the connection between them. Thursday and Friday passed without Gabe appearing either. Kai chided herself for feeling so let down. He was just a gym member being friendly. Probably out of town for work, like he'd mentioned, happened occasionally. On Monday morning, Kai had nearly resigned herself to the idea that their brief connection had run its course when the door swung open at 5:30 on the dot. And there he was, looking tired but smiling when he saw her. I was beginning to think you'd found another gym, she said, aiming for casual but hearing the genuine relief in her voice. Never, Gabe replied. I was in Singapore for an emergency. I would have told you, but I realized I don't have your number. The implication hung in the air between them that he would have contacted her personally if he could have. Well, we can fix that, Kai said boldly, surprising herself. She grabbed a membership card and a pen, writing her number on the back before handing it to him. Gabe looked at the number, then back at her, his expression serious. Are you sure? I don't want to cross any professional lines. Kai appreciated his consideration, but she was already well past worrying about professional boundaries. I'm sure, he pocketed the card and nodded. I'll text you later so you have mine too. His workout that morning was shorter than usual, and when he finished, he lingered at the desk. Kai, he began, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain, "would you like to have dinner with me sometime?" Kai knew she should probably think about this more carefully. He was a member at her workplace. She knew very little about him, really. And there was still something mysterious about how a transportation logistics manager could afford the Montgomery. But none of that seemed to matter against the warmth in his eyes and the genuine way he'd shown interest in her life over these past weeks. "I'd love to," she answered. "Great." He looked relieved. "How about Friday? I know a place in River North that's not too pretentious." "Friday works," Kai agreed, already mentally sorting through her limited wardrobe for something suitable. True to his word, Gabe texted her that afternoon, and they made specific plans for Friday night. He'd pick her up at 7, and they'd go to a restaurant called Aviary. Kai spent the rest of the week oscillating between excitement and anxiety. Every day at the gym, their interactions were charged with a new energy, the anticipation of their upcoming date, creating a pleasant tension. By Friday evening, Kai had changed outfits 4 times before settling on a simple black dress that her roommate insisted looked expensive enough for a date with someone who lived at the Montgomery. When the text came that Gabe was outside her building, she took one last look in the mirror, grabbed her purse, and headed downstairs. She'd expected maybe a nice sedan, given his job in logistics. What she hadn't expected was the sleek black Audi with Gabe standing beside it, looking devastatingly handsome in a tailored suit. "You look beautiful," he said as she approached, opening the passenger door for her. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "You clean up pretty well yourself." The restaurant was intimate and upscale, not the kind of place Kai frequented on her budget. The maitre d' greeted Gabe by name and led them to what was clearly one of the best tables in the house, tucked into a corner with a perfect view of both the restaurant and the Chicago skyline through the windows. "Come here often?" Kai asked, raising an eyebrow as a waiter immediately appeared with water and wine recommendations. Gabe looked slightly embarrassed. "It's convenient for work dinners sometimes." "Must be some transportation logistics company," she commented lightly, though the question was implicit. He met her eyes, and for a moment, Kai thought he was going to say something important. Instead, he just smiled. "Let's order, shall we? The chef here does amazing things with seafood." Throughout dinner, Kai found herself increasingly certain that Gabe Steele was not who he claimed to be. He was knowledgeable about wine, art, and global politics in a way that spoke of education and privilege. He knew the chef personally. And when a distinguished-looking older gentleman stopped by their table to greet him deferentially, Kai knew something was definitely off. "Friend of yours?" She asked after the man left. "Former client," Gabe said dismissively. "How's your salmon?" She let it go, but as the evening progressed and they moved from dinner to dessert to after-dinner drinks, the discrepancies in his story became harder to ignore. It wasn't until they were walking along the river afterward, the city lights reflecting on the water, that Kai decided to confront him. "Gabe," she said, stopping to face him. "Why did you tell me you work in transportation logistics?" He looked genuinely taken aback. "What do you mean?" "I mean that nothing about you says middle management. Not the way people treat you. Not this restaurant where everyone knows you. Not the $100,000 car, and definitely not the fact that you live on the 31st floor of one of Chicago's most exclusive buildings." Gabe was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the water. Finally, he turned back to her. "You're right, I'm not in middle management." "So what do you do?" Kai pressed. He took a deep breath. "I'm the CEO of Steele International Shipping. We operate freight transport in 42 countries." Kai stared at him. "Steele International, you own the company." "My grandfather founded it. My father expanded it. I took over 5 years ago," he explained, watching her carefully. "I'm sorry I wasn't completely honest. When we first started talking, it was refreshing to have a conversation with someone who didn't know who I was or what I have. The longer I waited to tell you, the harder it became." Kai tried to process this information. Steele International was one of the largest shipping conglomerates in the world. She'd seen their containers on trucks and trains, their logo on ships in the harbor. Gabriel wasn't just wealthy, he was in an entirely different stratosphere. "So you lied because you thought I'd treat you differently if I knew you were rich?" she asked, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. "Not rich, Kai. It's more complicated than that," he said quietly. "When you're in my position, people want things from you. They approach you with agendas. I just wanted to get to know you without all that getting in the way." Kai took a step back. "I understand wanting privacy, but you could have trusted me with the truth once we started, whatever this is." "You're right," he admitted. "I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of his revelation hanging between them. "Is there anything else I should know?" Kai finally asked. Gabe shook his head. "No more secrets, I promise." She wanted to be angrier, but something in his expression, vulnerability mixed with hope, made it difficult. "I'm going to need some time to process this." "Of course," he said immediately. "Take all the time you need." The drive back to her apartment was quiet, though not uncomfortably so. When they arrived, Gabe walked her to the door of her building but didn't try to kiss her, which Kai appreciated. She needed space to think. "Thank you for dinner," she said, "and for finally telling me the truth." "Thank you for giving me a chance to explain," he replied. "I hope I'll see you Monday morning," she nodded. "I'll be there. 5:30 as always." The weekend passed in a blur of studying and overthinking. Kai's roommates were appropriately shocked when she told them who Gabe Steele really was, but ultimately unhelpful in deciding what to do next. One thought she should definitely keep seeing him, hello, billionaire, while the other was suspicious of his motives. Why would someone like that be interested in a normal person? By Monday morning, Kai had made up her mind. She would continue to see where things went with Gabe, but with her eyes wide open. If his interest in her was genuine, then his wealth shouldn't matter in either direction. When he arrived at 5:30 looking somewhat apprehensive, Kai smiled genuinely. "Good morning," she said. "No smoothie today." Relief washed over his face. "I wasn't sure if, I can go get one now if you'd like." "I'm teasing you," she laughed, "but I wouldn't say no." Their dynamic shifted after that night, becoming more honest but also more intimate. Gabe no longer hid his position or the demands it placed on him. He talked openly about board meetings and international travel, about the pressure of running a company with thousands of employees and the legacy he was trying to uphold. In turn, Kai shared her own stresses, upcoming exams, student loan debt, and fears about finding a job in her field after graduation. To his credit, Gabe never offered to solve her problems with money, which would have felt patronizing. Instead, he listened and supported her efforts. They began seeing each other outside of the gym regularly. Sometimes, it was dinner at exclusive restaurants where Gabe was recognized. But just as often, it was takeout at Kai's apartment, where he seemed genuinely happy to squeeze onto her worn couch and watch movies with her roommates. 3 months into their relationship, Kai received devastating news. The sports clinic where she'd been promised a position after graduation had lost its funding and couldn't honor their agreement. With only 2 months until graduation and most positions already filled for the coming year, her carefully planned future suddenly seemed precarious. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she admitted to Gabe one evening as they walked through Millennium Park. "I've applied to every opening I can find, but most want more experience than I have." Gabe was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. "Steele International has a corporate wellness program," he finally said. "We have an on-site sports therapy clinic for employees. I know they're looking to expand services." Kai stopped walking and turned to face him. "Gabe, no, I can't work for your company." "Why not? You're qualified. The position exists independently of me. You'd be helping people who need your skills." "Because it would look like nepotism," she explained. "No one would respect me if they thought I got the job because I'm dating the boss." "You wouldn't be reporting to me," he argued. "The wellness program has its own director who reports to HR. I'd have no direct involvement." Kai shook her head. "It still wouldn't feel right. I need to make my own way, Gabe. Surely you can understand that." He looked frustrated but nodded. I do understand, I just hate seeing you worry when I could help. I know, she said softly, taking his hand, and I appreciate that you want to. But this is something I need to figure out myself. 2 weeks later, while studying late for finals, Kai received a call from Chicago Athletic Medicine, one of the most prestigious sports therapy clinics in the city. Somehow, her application had made it to the top of the pile, and they wanted to interview her. The interview went surprisingly well, and to her shock, they offered her a position on the spot contingent on her graduation, of course. The salary was better than she dared hope for, and the opportunity to work with their caliber of athletes was a dream come true. It wasn't until she was leaving, clutching her offer letter, that she overheard 2 staff members mentioning a recent donation from Steele International that had funded several new positions. Kai felt her heart sink. She immediately called Gabe. "Did you do this?" she demanded when he answered. "Do what?" he asked, but there was a telling pause before he spoke. "Chicago Athletic Medicine. Did you donate money so they would hire me?" The silence on the other end of the line was all the confirmation she needed. "Gabe, how could you?" "After I specifically told you I wanted to make it on my own." "Kai, please let me explain," he began. "I didn't tell them to hire you. I made a general donation to expand their program because I believe in their work. Your resume and interview did the rest." "But you knew I had applied there," she pressed. "Yes," he admitted. "But they would never have hired you if you weren't qualified, donation or not. They have a reputation to maintain." Kai felt torn. On one hand, she was furious that he had interfered after she'd made her feelings clear. On the other, she understood that he'd tried to help in a way that preserved her agency. "I need some space," she finally said. "I'll talk to you later." She hung up before he could respond and walked to the lake, trying to sort through her feelings. By the time she reached the water, her anger had cooled enough to recognize that Gabe's intentions had been good, even if his execution was flawed. He was used to solving problems with resources that was his reality. And he hadn't directly bought her a job. He'd created an opportunity that she had earned through her own merit. That evening, she texted him to meet at their favorite coffee shop neutral territory for what needed to be a serious conversation. When Gabe arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I overstepped." "Yes, you did," Kai agreed. "But I've been thinking about why, and I understand you were trying to help. The thing is, Gabe, if we're going to work, you need to respect my boundaries even when you have the power to ignore them." He nodded seriously. "You're right. I should have trusted you to find your own path. It won't happen again." "Good," she said. "Because I'm going to take the job." He looked surprised. "You are?" "Yes, because regardless of how the position came to exist, I earned it with my qualifications. And I'm not going to punish myself by turning down a dream opportunity just because you had a hand in creating it." Relief washed over his features. I'm glad. "But," she continued, "if we're going to keep seeing each other, we need to be partners. Equal partners. That means you don't use your money or influence to manage my life, even with the best intentions." "I understand," he said solemnly. "Equal partners." Over the next several months, they settled into a new rhythm. Kai graduated and began her job at the clinic, quickly proving herself valuable beyond any connection to Gabe. For his part, Gabe respected her independence while still finding small ways to support her cooking dinner when she was exhausted after a long day, listening to her challenges with difficult cases, celebrating her successes. 1 year after their first date, Gabe suggested they revisit the spot along the river where he'd finally told her the truth about who he was. The evening was unseasonably warm for Chicago, and the city lights reflected on the water just as they had that night. "I've been thinking a lot about that night," he said as they leaned against the railing, watching boats pass below. "About how close I came to losing you because I wasn't honest." "You weren't the only one being tested that night," Kai replied. "I had to decide if I could handle who you really were, wealth and responsibility included. And look at us now," he smiled, turning to face her. "Equal partners, like you said." Equal partners, she agreed. Gabe reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Which is why I wanted to ask you something important here, where we truly began. Kai's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a stunning yet tasteful diamond ring. Kai O'Malley, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, this past year has been the happiest of my life. You challenge me, ground me, and make me better every day. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Tears pricked at the corners of Kai's eyes. Are you sure you want to marry someone who yells at you for helping her get a job? She asked with a watery laugh. I've never been more sure of anything, he replied. I love you exactly as you are, stubborn independence included. Then yes, she said, her heart overflowing. Yes, I'll marry you. As Gabe slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss, Kai marveled at how far they'd come. From early morning conversations across a gym desk to this moment, a journey neither of them could have predicted, but that had changed both their lives immeasurably. 2 years later, they stood in the newly expanded Sports Medicine Center at Steele International headquarters, a joint project they'd developed together. Kai served as director, having left the clinic to help build something that combined both their visions. The center not only served Steele employees, but also provided pro bono services to athletes from underserved communities, fulfilling Kai's dream of making sports medicine accessible to those who needed it most. Mrs. Steele, the new equipment for the rehabilitation room has arrived, her assistant announced, still using the formal name despite Kai's insistence that everyone call her by her first name. Thank you, Marcus, and please, it's just Kai, she reminded him with a smile. As her assistant left, Gabe appeared in the doorway of her office, their 6-month-old daughter, Sophia, cradled in his arms. There's my favorite CEO and my favorite tiny human, Kai said, reaching for the baby. Ex-CEO, Gabe corrected her, handing over their daughter. I'm just chairman of the board now, remember? Much more reasonable hours. It had been his wedding gift to her, stepping back from the day-to-day operations of Steele International to focus on their family and the charitable foundation they'd established together. How was your morning meeting? She asked, breathing in the sweet smell of Sophia's hair. Productive. The board approved the expansion into renewable shipping technologies, he replied, perching on the edge of her desk. How about you? How's the new physical therapist working out? She's brilliant, Kai said. Already has the football team singing her praises. Gabe smiled, watching Kai with their daughter. Do you ever think about how all of this started, with 5:30 a.m. workouts and smoothies? Only every day, she laughed. Though I still maintain you should have told me who you were sooner. If I had, would you have given me a chance? He asked, a question they'd revisited often over the years. Kai considered for a moment, looking down at their daughter, then back up at the man she'd fallen in love with long before she knew about his wealth or position. Yes, she said confidently. Because it was never about who you were on paper, Gabe. It was always about who you are here. She placed her hand over his heart. He covered her hand with his own. The best decision I ever made was walking into that gym at 5:30 in the morning. The best decision I ever made was taking that job, she countered. I think we both got the better end of the deal, he said, leaning down to kiss her softly. As they stood there, their daughter between them and the center they'd built together surrounding them, Kai knew it was true. What had begun as a chance encounter between a gym attendant and the CEO, she didn't recognize had become something neither of them could have imagined, a partnership of equals, built on respect, understanding, and a love that had proven stronger than any difference in their circumstances. And it had all started with a simple good morning at 5:30 a.m.